Welcome to Concordia, my mostly scratch-built layout, loosely set in 1940s New England and based on the model railroading classic H.O. Railroad That Grows, except I'm building it in N-scale. In this video, I'll be showing my new scratch-built apartment building inspired by a real-life counterpart, but also my admiration for Metcalfe models that I've seen so many YouTubers build. The inspiration for this build started from a local apartment complex that I pass regularly going to my local park with my dog for our daily walks in the morning. It's a series of 7 apartment buildings, and they're all designed similarly, except for 1 or 2 differences. Certain buildings have round tops there. The others have square tops. I kind of like these arched top windows, so that's the one that I chose to model mine after. You can get a better view from the other end of the complex of what the side of the building looks like. I was just really taken by these apartments. I'm not quite sure why, but this is what I've gone after. One feature that's really notable is that the buildings look like they're actually 2 buildings joined together. You can see the back end of the building actually is lower than the front end. So that actually made the design for me a little bit easier, and I could build the building in 2 separate stages. So as with all of my builds, I start off in Inkscape and I import a picture of them so that I can work on my design of how I want my buildings to look. And as you can see, instead of 2 stories high, I made mine 3 stories tall. From there, I lay out my floor design so that I can get an idea of the size and where everything fits together. And from there, I go on to design the building itself with all its various components. Can turn into quite a few, as this layout shows, of all the different parts that I use and how they all go together. I then design a texture for the facade, and that ends up wrapping around the outer card of the building. I take that design and I export it to my Cricut die cutting machine, and then it goes into action and starts cutting out the design that I can then use without my having to do all those intricate cuts myself. The cuts are a lot sharper, they're clearer, and more precise than what I could do by hand. Almost kind of like cheating, but the effect is much better. What we get is this nice texture that we can then wrap around the facade of the building. But this is also where my admiration for Metcalfe models comes into play. As you can see, I've got some card already glued in place behind the texture, and this was based on what I've seen on various Metcalfe design plans, and I was trying to come up with an idea that might work best building my models. So as you can see along the bottom there's a slight slit in the cards, and that's where these floors would fit in. I was hoping to be able to create an easy to put together model that would kind of like just snap into place. And it actually does, snaps into place, and then the building holds itself together. So it wasn't a bad design per se, and I end up using something along these lines. These now are stiffeners behind the windows there. They would get glued into place and stiffen the wall, but also provide a shelf to put the next floor on top of. But this was just one design idea that I had. This was another design. As you can see, the brackets to hold the floors in place are a little bit different. I got this from Metcalfe's low relief buildings. First, my card is too thin. It's 0.5 millimeter. I think a millimeter would be better. It worked in this instance, but because it's only in the front there and it doesn't support the floor in the back, it doesn't work in a full building like this. I would need a different design for this. But what you can see now is I just glued up the entire building here just to see what it looked like. And it actually looks pretty good. You know, it came out well. The card printed nice. The interior cards, the supports work well. My floors needed a little better cutting, but it looked good. Ultimately, I went with the design that was similar to the first idea. Right now, I'm gluing in on top of the side brackets that extend back only about halfway up to the window line, placing glue on top of the wall there, because that's going to support the floor. But these will slot between the walls and on top of those side supports, provide the floor for the next level. As you can see, there's some wires running off of there, and I attached a nano LED to the floor so that it is in the middle of the floor or the ceiling of the floor below it. To try to keep it as neat as possible, I've run the wires down through a hole I drilled in the back of the floor, and you can see it on the floor already in place. There's another hole there. So all the wires will run down through those holes and they'll all come out in the same place. Should be a neater, more elegant way of running the wires without having to destroy the back of the building. Here I've added the back onto the building, and as you can see, it hides all the lines neatly, and they all run out the bottom. Looks like a rat's nest, but otherwise it looks okay. Added, of course, some curtains to the windows, and you've got a real sturdy little model there. And there the model sat untouched for about 10 months until I picked it up again this month to complete it. And then I realized just how far along I actually was with the model. And it really wasn't much more to do to complete it. I needed to put the windows in, the glazing in, and some details. But a lot of the building had actually been finished. Here what I'm doing is a version of Chanwell's sticky label method for making window frames. Whereas Michael puts sticky labels onto plastic sheeting, I use my Cricut machine to cut out vinyl window frames and stick them onto the plastic. Because it's a permanent vinyl, it won't fall off, and it's got like a sticky back to it. So you place it on the plastic and it holds it in place. Then I just line it up with the opening in the card, press it down into place with some glue, and it holds it really well. It then just becomes a matter of having the Cricut machine cut out the texture that wrap around the building and putting it all together. After gluing the two buildings together, this is what you get. It was a nice build. I ended up putting some card underneath, 3 layers of 0.5 millimeter card to use as a platform. There'll be sidewalk attached to that, and that will be how I design the sidewalks alongside the street. It comes up just a little bit above my street level. Once I get all my buildings built, then I'll design the final version of the sidewalks. One last thing I wanted to point out was a neat technique that I discovered. If you notice on the building, there's an efflorescence on the brick, the white. That's like a crystalline salt deposit that builds up on brick. And you can notice that on buildings. And I wanted to recreate that technique. It's really a very simple process. You just take a wet paintbrush and just rub on the texture. Now, I'm not sure if this is because it's laser printed on card. I get these printed at Staples. So this is laser printed on cardstock. I'm not quite sure why, but when you do this, it removes the color from the grout lines, but not the brick itself, which is interesting. It creates this efflorescence on the brick. In other buildings, I've actually used a old brick pattern in Inkscape that shows that the efflorescence already applied, but this brick was kind of pristine, and I really didn't want that. So I used this technique to create it. So we'll place the apartment about where it's going to go. And as you can see, there is a slight lip. It's more pronounced because there's dual edge here. So this will serve as the curb down, and then there'll be a parking lot ground behind it and a driveway down the sides. But that was part of the other reason why it's so long for me to do this project, is because it moved into another room. We went from the dark, dank basement upstairs to a spare bedroom. So now we've got more room to work. Right now it's only sitting on a trestle table, but that'll change soon. I'm going to build a train table for it. So is it worth doing a Metcalf style build? Probably not. I mean, the amount of time that it takes to set up the pieces to go together the way they do for a one-off project like an apartment building, a train station, or something like that, it's really probably not worth all the effort, although it is fun designing it. If you're doing a big production run like Metcalf would do, that of course, makes it all the more worthwhile. But like I said, for a one-off building, it's probably not worth the time. Starting to come together. We got a few more buildings on, but I got another plan for the next building I'm gonna make. So if you want to see my train station that I built last time, check that video right over there. Okay, thanks for watching.